Yo, what's up everybody? It's Friday. Yeah, December 2nd. Folks, every time that I think I've seen it all, I just get treated to some more of this crazy behavior and statements and commentary from the monetarist crowd. It's like, that's like the gift that keeps on giving. And today was no different than many other days that I've spoken about in the past. So we had the job report today, and it came out much stronger than expected. 263,000 payrolls. They were looking at something like 205,000. Remember, on Wednesday, the ADP payroll report came out. It was weak. It was 127. And what do you think the monetarists did? Now, this was obviously good news. The economy's still creating jobs, 3.7% unemployment rate. You even had average hourly earnings rising at the fastest rate in 10 months. And of course, what was the reaction to that good economic news? They sold, and they sold aggressively on the opening. Market was down like 500 points. I sent out an email to my subscribers. I said, you got to buy this. It's your duty to buy this. You got to go against the monetarists. By the way, that's another good reason why you should be subscribing to my report, MMT Trader. You get on my email list. But anyway, and I felt it was absolutely my duty to go against that. I mean, when you see stupid behavior, when you see ignorance, especially willful ignorance, I just feel compelled that I have to go against that. I mean, wild horses couldn't stop me from going against that. And I did, just trading the market today. I bought some on the opening. We're down 500. And we ended up on the Dow, we ended up basically flat on the other things. But if you recall, and the reason why I say this is because, this is like psychopathic manic behavior. All right? 2 days ago, when Powell gave his speech, made his comments, they were in a frenzy buying the market up. But remember, that was the day we were up 600 points because they felt like Powell's comments at the time that he made those remarks back on Wednesday, that was kind of a friendly picture, at least in terms of the heads, the crazy minds of the monetarists. They felt like, we would see Powell was hinting towards a slowdown, or actually came out and mentioned something about a slowdown in the pace of rate hikes. Not that they would stop the rate hikes, mind you, all right? Because, again, I mean, this is so deeply woven with internal contradictions on their part, on the, the part of the monetarists. It's like, it's like the proverbial peeling away the onion layers. Like, first they were all scared about rates rising, just the fact that rates were rising. Now when it was hinted by Powell that maybe they're going to rise a little bit less rapidly, in a slower pace, then that was suddenly like really, really bullish, and they dove in there. But they're still going to be rising. He didn't say they're going to stop rising. He said just at a slower pace. And today we get economic news that's good economic news. And folks, let me just say something, okay? Because a lot of these people on Wall Street who think they're very smart, they get a little cutesy. And by that I mean, like they'll come out and they say, well, good is not really good. Good is bad, and bad is good. It's kind of like an Orwellian 1984, that kind of thing. Good is bad and bad is good. No, good is good, okay? When the economy is creating jobs and when economic growth is positive and accelerating, that's a good thing. And you can tell me until you're blue in the face that is a bad thing, but I want to tell you it is not a bad thing. A bad thing is an actual contraction in the economy for reasons that are understandable, not because of price changes. I went through this yesterday. Not because of price changes related to changes in interest rates, which is all that interest rate adjustments are. They're price changes, and the economy is always subject to price changes. I mean, that's just a fact. That happens as a consequence of policy. You know, it could be tax policy, it could be fiscal policy, it could be trade policy, it could be monetary policy, it could be industrial policy, it could be the policy of a large corporate entity that's basically like a monopoly or a, you know, something like that in the economy. And so it's constantly faced with price changes. I said yesterday, like your job really, and it's not that hard as an investor, is just like to understand when you're talking about price changes, like, you know, what sector is going to benefit, what cohort is going to benefit, what cohort is going to, you know, get hurt by that, and try to position yourself. So anyway, the monetarists are the gift that keeps on giving, like almost on an everyday basis. And folks, I cannot emphasize to you how important it is to go against ignorance. Doesn't matter, you know, regardless of how much you know and understand with respect to, you know, economics or finance or Wall Street or investing. I mean, this is just a general rule of life. Go against ignorance, especially willful ignorance. And I classify this as willful ignorance because these people want to stay ignorant. They want to stay in the dark. They want to embrace a dogma which has been shown over and over again to be incorrect and like deeply, deeply flawed. All right? And unfortunately, like we're subject to this because you have, I'm going to talk about this in a second, we have policymakers who are themselves deeply infused with this false understanding and this willful ignorance. And they're not going to change because you can't get into the club unless you embrace, you know, that dogma, that ignorance. And I'm gonna show you something today, because today was like double fun for me. It was fun because, you know, I went against the monetarist selling frenzy in the morning, which was ridiculous and stupid and ignorant, okay, and I made money. But then it was also fun for me because a Fed official came out with a ridiculous, incompetent statement that I clipped out, and I'm going to put it up here. So the Fed official was Tom Barkin, and he is the president of the Virginia Fed. What is that? The I don't remember which one, but he's one of the Fed presidents. All right, Federal Reserve Bank of Richmond Fed president. And here's what he said. He said that we're having a hard time at the Fed because household savings are so high. And when I read this, I was like, oh my God. I mean, this is so idiotic. I don't know if this guy is an economist by education. I don't know what his background is, but look, he's a high-level policy maker. He's the president of a Federal Reserve Bank. And he said that the reason why the Fed is having so much difficulty with their policy and getting it to stick is because household savings are so high. Folks, let me tell you something. This comes from Economics 101. And when I tell you this, regardless of whether you ever studied, you know, or read one page of economics or not, you're going to understand this intrinsically. That savings is a leakage to demand. In other words, what Barkin was trying to say was like people have so much savings that they're able to spend, and we can't cool the spending down, you know, because they're spending their saving. Savings, by definition, is a leakage to demand. Because, by definition, when people save, they spend less, okay? So what he was saying was completely opposite of what the reality is. The reality is, if people were all saving, if we were all saving and not spending, the economy would go to zero. It would go to zero. It wouldn't like boost up. Think about it. And you know, it made me recall, and I did many videos on this, a similar idiotic comment made by Minneapolis President Neil Kashkari, Minneapolis Fed President Neil Kashkari, who said back in the pandemic in 2020, like April and May, he said, "I'm not that worried about the economy." He was giving an interview. He said, "I'm not that worried about the economy because savings are really, really high because we're not going to movie theaters and restaurants." And again, I was like, oh my God, where do they dig these people up? Like, if I don't go to the movie theater or the restaurant, then the movie theater owner and the restaurant owner's savings go down, right? I'm not spending my money. It's not flowing to them. This is what's called the fallacy of composition that a lot of people fall prey to. You know, an individual or a group of individuals can save, but in the aggregate, that means all of us, we can't all save at the same time and expect savings to go up. Somebody has to be a net spender, and that's the government. The government is a deficit spender, so the government's savings ends up to be our savings. And the other thing stupid about Barkin's, comment, which is a little more subtle, like I don't expect he would understand this at all, because if he doesn't understand the fact that savings is a leakage to demand, like it sucks away demand, people are sitting on their money, they're not spending it. He doesn't understand this. People, this guy is a Fed president, okay? All of you out there, with the knowledge you have, can do a better job than what this guy's doing. He's a Fed president. People, this is one of our highest policymakers when it comes to economic policy, okay? An idiot. Anyway, the other point that he doesn't understand, which is much more subtle, and that's going to go way over his head, because if this savings thing, if he doesn't understand that, he also doesn't understand that the very policy the Fed is following right now, which is the rate hikes, that is a fiscal addition. That is transferring. These are interest income transfers to the economy from the government. And I've been telling you this day in and day out. You know, what are we like? 2 months into the fiscal year, we're already almost 50 billion over where we were last year at this time in terms of interest income put into the economy because of the Fed's rate hikes. And it's only going to keep going up. But you can't expect him to understand that when he doesn't even understand, folks. He doesn't. Look, think about it yourself. When you try to save, what does it mean? You spend less. You spend less. The only other way for you to save and keep your spending the same way, okay? Well, there's two ways. One, you can access credit, which, you know, that just gives you, you know, some money to spend, but it gives you a debt to pay off. So the saving going to ultimately go back to servicing the debt. But the other way, which is a clean and beautiful way, is for the government to net spend more. That's what happened during the pandemic in 2020. Like, savings went up to like 6 trillion. Here's a chart. And then we taxed it all. The government taxed it all away, and then it cut spending, you know, by a record amount in the first half of this year. And that just sucks. That's the swimming pool sucking it out, right? But folks, I want you to understand there's a couple of things I have to repeat this. You know, repetition is how we learn. These people don't know anything. And not only don't they know the really, you know, kind of pathological part about it is that they got it all backwards, but they're in charge, and they keep doubling down on the same wrong things. They keep, you know way more than these people. I could take any one of you and put them in their position right now, and you would be light years ahead in turn. Not even, we can't even say ahead because they're nowhere. I mean, you would be in a position to make rational policy moves, things that make sense. I mean, it's unbelievable. All right, so two things. Number one, it is your duty to go against willful ignorance. And there is no, at the current time, if we're going to be talking about investing and the economy and the markets, at the current time, there is no example of willful ignorance greater than what we are seeing right now in terms of this monetarist psychosis that is out there that grips everybody, and the policy that is behind, policies that are, entwined with that. Okay? It is your duty to go against that. You have to go against that. And again, I think, that's, you should be signing up for my report because I send this stuff out before. I give you the opportunity, get in and make some money. And the other thing is, again, just be aware, and this is basically the same thing, that it's sickness. It is just a crazy belief system that they will never change, because in order to be in that group, you got to adhere to that belief system. All right? So, but it is your duty to go against willful ignorance. And there's a lot of examples of that in other areas, some very, very dangerous too. But if we're just, discussing investing and economics and stuff like that on this channel, we'll keep it focused on that. There is no greater example of willful ignorance. I'll use the term even stupidity. Some people might say that's too harsh, that's nasty. I'll use it, stupidity. Willful stupidity. It is your duty to go against that. And I've seen on YouTube, like hundreds and hundreds of channels of people who, by the way, get tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of views of their videos, which propagate this willful ignorance, this stupidity. So you're lucky you tumbled here by one reason or another, and that's great. And that's one of the reasons why I can say with absolute confidence I could take any one of you and stick you in that position, take out that idiot Tom Barkin and stick you in that position, and we'd have at least one person who would be, conducting or speaking out for rational policy as opposed to this idiocy. Really, really incredible. Anyway, that's it for today, folks. Appreciate your viewership. Some of you have been asking me to do some topics of your interest, which I will get to. And, keep those ideas coming, because that gives me stuff to talk about. All right, see ya. Bye.